Croft, our Attorney General, mentioned two very important ways to communicate if you would like to help. First of all, if you have any information, according to Attorney General Ashcroft, individuals who can report any information about any of these acts, any of the plane crashes, if you've heard anything, believe anything, by hitting the web at www.if, as in Frank, ifccfbi.gov. And also, you can contact, there's a hotline been set up in the Justice Department. You can call 1-800-331-0075, also with information or looking for information about individuals, people who may have been injured, loved ones, whatever. These are the two official government sites at this point that have been established to help aid the rest of America as we all try to cope with this. Let us now go. We will be hearing, by the way, from President Bush at 9 o'clock, and we are not sure exactly where he is. We know that he is safe. We know that that is part of one of the things that happens when there is an emergency of this type. They do not like to keep this knowledge public. It is for safety. He will be back at the White House, and he will be speaking at 9 o'clock to the nation. He will address the nation at that time. Let us go to Ross Gadati right now. Ross has been, as we know, most of the day out at the 9/11 Tactical here in the Pittsburgh area at the airport, where they are on the highest of alerts. Ross?
Yeah, Patrice, before we get to that, it just struck me what you had just said before. We in the United States of America are not allowed to know where our president is because there is a potential threat to his life. It has been, as Senator John Warner put it, one of the darkest days in American history. No more apparent than here at Greater Pittsburgh, or rather Pittsburgh International Airport, where this massive facility has seen, since the bombing, one plane land and one plane take off. It was a military plane. We've seen so many images that capture what has happened today, the bombing, the results in New York, the horrifying sights in Somerset County. Let me show you another face of terrorism in western Pennsylvania. This is the front gate, I think you're about to see it, of the 9/11 Tactical Airlift Group. They are in what's called Threat Con Delta, military parlance. That is the highest threat condition you can possibly establish. Jersey barriers in a zigzag pattern to assure no cars can get through, no car bombs can get through. That's a lesson we learned in the early 80s from the car bombs. You saw also there random vehicle searches going on. It doesn't matter who you are. They're checking everything out to assure that your vehicle and you as a person are not carrying anything that could threaten any of the personnel on board. As a matter of fact, I was searched. It was quite a hair-raising experience. It put into terms for me just how serious this was. They have hardened the guard positions as well with sandbags, and there are possibly automatic. I can tell you, based on my experience having been in the military, doing just what those folks are doing, there are automatic weapons positions there in the event that they are needed. Now, these folks doing their training, United States Air Force here at, Lackland Air Force Base, where they do military police base security. Now, the Army, let's not forget them, 99th Force Command here in the greater Pittsburgh area are in charge of 25,000 soldiers in 5 states, have beefed up security, asking the Collier Township Police to step in and man some of the posts out there. Also want to mention the 171st Air Refueling Wing. Once again, all 3 of these military facilities in the western Pennsylvania area are at what's called Threat Con Delta. Simply put, you can get a no higher rating. They are on a war footing in our own backyard tonight, and that really puts it into perspective. Patrice?
It really does, Ross. Threat Con Delta, that is what we are facing right now. And when you think about it, there really can be no other response to something like this. Many people had made comments earlier that this was an act of terrorism, but it was also an act of war, and even Senator Santorum referred to it as an act of war, and that it would be responded to as such.
It was really interesting, Patrice. I went in, and we're standing right beside the Embassy Suites. This is our vantage point, and I went in and asked an obvious question just to see the reaction. I asked the people there, how angry are you? Of course, we always get angry when there are terrorism acts against Americans across the seas. But today, this day, September 11th, war broke out here. Americans were, for lack of a better word, slaughtered en masse here. People are feeling a sense of anger talking to these people that I certainly, as an American, have never seen. Granted, I'm only 34 years old. I didn't live through World War II. But these folks are, first they were stunned, and now they're angry. The problem is, who are we angry at, and what are we going to do about it? That's a question that remains to be answered.
And that'll be something that have to be very carefully dealt with so that people do not respond inappropriately to people who really are not responsible.
Absolutely.
For this
Arab
situation.
Americans.
Exactly. Thanks very much, Russ, from the 9/11. We will talk with you a little bit later on in the evening. John Shumway joins me again, and we know that earlier today we had talked about evacuations. Were there evacuations? Some companies decided, John, to do it voluntarily. Others were saying, yes, go. You were part of it.
Early on, after the initial attack in New York, it was a situation where employers were saying to employees, if you feel like you need to get out, go ahead. If you need to go get your kids to feel safe, go ahead. But after the plane went down in Somerset, it became a different ballgame. At that point, it became, okay, this is serious. We need to look out for ourselves. We don't know what's going to happen next. And that point, that's when we started getting the actual evacuations on Grant Street. It was an interesting hour, and what an incredible difference between the first hour and after the crash in Somerset.
We work in a government office here. We're hearing all these reports and everything about the hijacked planes and that. Everybody's up in arms in there.
We started the day talking in our offices about what had happened in New York City, but then things changed.
The whole building's being evacuated, and our supervision on our floor made sure everyone was left, and we're gone for the day. They said there was something about rumor in the building is something about a plane in Somerset.
Clearly, the crash of the plane in Somerset County put Pittsburgh on a state of alert.
I can't think of anything worse in American history, to be honest with you. So it's just numb. I'm just wondering what our reaction will be now.
I just can't believe it. I mean, I look at the news reports and I just can't believe it's our country. It's like Orson Welles. It's just disbelief. I'm just kind of shocked.
I am shook to the core. I just can't believe it. Tomorrow will just never be normal again. The world just won't ever be normal again. I'm concerned about war. They have to do something. It's not safe anymore. People are very shaken.
Yeah, so what do you do now?
I go home and watch the news, unfortunately. Try to explain it to my child. How do I explain it to my 7-year-old? What do you say? Some insane person? How do you explain something like this?
People trying to get home packed onto the Port Authority's T. Port Authority put on more trains, but they were filled to capacity even before they arrived at Steel Plaza.
I'm horrified. I'm petrified. My daughter's down in school at George Washington University, and I can't reach her. And this was threatened a couple of years ago that this was going to be done. And the fact that maybe we didn't pay enough attention, I don't know. But I'm really, I'm scared.
There's definitely going to be more casualties in all of Pearl Harbor at that attack. And I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but this is definitely an act of war. And I think we should start acting instead of talking for a change.
Today, it's just really heartbreaking. Why anybody would do this is beyond me. We have offices in that area on 44 Wall Street, and we're just devastated. We're just so concerned with our people and just all the other people and families that have been hurt so terribly.
What'd you think when they said you need to leave?
I had made that decision a little earlier, and early this morning had opted out to let my people go when they felt they needed to go home. It's scary with families, you know, people all over and things like that. It really is.
Now, there was one gentleman who said to me early on at around 10 o'clock or just before 10 o'clock, he was working in the Mellon Processing Center up on one of the upper floors, looking out the window, at the same time watching the reports and hearing that the FAA had grounded all flights in the United States. At that point, he and his coworkers saw a jet, a large jet, fly past the city of Pittsburgh to the north, moving toward the southeast. He said to me, Patrice, when I was talking to him on the street, he said that had to have been flight, what we now know as 93, that later crashed in Somerset. Now, at that point, we didn't know as much as we do now, but it certainly sounds entirely feasible, but that is exactly what they saw.
At that time, in that direction.
Right. Now, let's talk about tomorrow. I talked to Ron Grundle from Mellon Bank. He says that they have put out on their telephone line for all their employees normal operation. Everything's open, normal operation. They would like their employees to make sure they bring along their ID badges, which, as we all are, we're all supposed to bring them every day.
Right.
But he's saying tomorrow in particular, make sure you have your ID badge along. And we haven't gotten any word from any other businesses in town that they're going to do anything other than normal operations tomorrow. Obviously, if they do, we'll pass that along. But it looks like the attempt will be, at least, to get things back to normal tomorrow, if there will ever be a normal again.
You're right, normal in quotes.
Right.
John, you know, you and I were talking just a few moments ago about the number of emergency help, the people who went who took that call to go to the World Trade Center.
Right.
And we understand now there are some horrific reports from the AP at this moment that of 400 firefighters who were the first to reach the World Trade Center, that as many as half of them perished.
You know, that was when I was watching the coverage this morning, that was one of the first things that went through my mind. All the people who had rushed to the first event when the second happened. I mean, they were right down there on the ground. They were trying to get up. Everyone else is trying to get out. But emergency people, they always put their lives on the line. They go in, they're going in to try and help, not realizing that the second half was still to come. And I knew there were going to be figures like that, but that's really sobering.
This is just the first coming over. As you say, it's very sobering. That's a minimum, at least, of 200 people who went to help and lost their lives doing just that. Thank you, though, for spending the time, and we, of course, will talk with you a little bit later and find out what's happening. Thanks very much, John. Right now, let's go to Mary Rob Jackson. Oh, well, actually, early this morning, Mary Rob was over at the Hilton Hotel. This was right after the first reports of the horrible damage that occurred in New York City at the World Trade Center. And there were a group of people over in the Hilton Hotel who were watching some of the reports. They had gathered there, and Mary Rob Jackson was among them.
We should understand is that there was no specific threat that the U.S. government is aware of.
It was one of those moments when you not only couldn't believe your eyes, you didn't want to.
We're all standing here crying because of this dreadful thing that has happened. These are human beings that God loves and families that God loves, and that there is such hatred in this world.
No specific terror alert other than the worldwide caution.
In the initial minutes after the attack on the Trade Center, the Hilton lobby here was a snapshot of world reaction.
I'm devastated, and I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. I just really want to be with my family.
These are vicious attacks on the United States. I know they have to retaliate. They have to.
We feel we are safe in the United States, very safe, but right now it seems that peace have to be everywhere in the world.
I terrified for the number of the people died in this tragedy.
It's scary. You just don't know what can happen, and you don't know who's behind it. What can you do? Where are you safe?
This man lives in New York City. He has good friends who work in the Trade Center. Like many, he had no words.
That again from the Hilton Hotel, Mary Rob Jackson reporting, speaking with people who were just as many as most Americans were today, just absolutely stunned by what happened.
If I'm not mistaken, Mary Rob's interviews with those people over the Hilton Hotel took place before the crash of the United Airlines Flight 93 in Somerset County. Andy Briggs is one of our many reporters who was at the scene of that crash, and he had an opportunity to talk with some people who witnessed the crash.
The jetliner crashed just over the hill from this woman's house. Emma Burkett says she was watching TV coverage from New York when she heard the plane go down.
Through the trees there, all I seen was a great big red ball and a big black smoke going up in the air, and the trailer was rumbling and that before that. And
I think what probably caught my eye the most was that it was just so bright and so shiny.
Loretta Haas was driving her daughter to the dentist when she saw the Boeing 757 fall from the sky.
It was fairly low. It wasn't treetop low, but it was lower than it should have been. And like I said, it was cocked like it had been turning to the left. And just in a nosedive position, once it cleared the treetops, I couldn't see it no more. And then when I got out to 30s, whenever I seen the big puff of smoke. And
Susan McElwain didn't witness the crash, but says she did see a smaller second plane moments earlier in the same area.
And it came right over top of me, and I thought it was going to hit the van, because I juked, because I saw it. And so I stopped, and it pulled down a little bit, and then there's trees right there in front of me, and it went right up over the trees and went over real close to the trees because I just sat there thinking, this is going to crash. I'm going to see this plane crash. And then all of a sudden there was the big explosion.
Authorities have not confirmed the existence of a second plane. McElwain did tell state police what she saw, but has yet to be interviewed by investigators.
To me, it would be like maybe a small Learjet. You know, it had the big fin on the back that comes up like this and goes across.
For those few seconds when I seen that jet and the things that went through my mind, imagine those people. You know, it's just horrible that things like this have to happen. And if people pray and they believe in the Lord, I think that they need to be doing that right now. I really do.
That's Andy Briggs, who was at the scene when the Somerset crash, talking to some eyewitnesses. One of the last people you heard talk said that she saw another plane. There has been a lot of speculation whether the plane that crashed in Somerset, and again, it is speculation, whether it may have been shot down. Remember, it was the last of the planes to crash. The other two had already gone to the World Trade Centers and the one near the Pentagon. Andy Sheehan joins us now. And Andy, you a couple of hours ago brought out the fact that there was this kind of speculation. Get any more information on it?
Well, we've been getting calls from Somerset County and sources there, you know, secondhand information and not reliable, but information and speculation that this plane may have been shot down. I mean, the question is, all these three other planes hit their target, yet this plane crashed in rural Pennsylvania and did not. So this gives rise. Now, the woman said that she had seen a small plane. She believed it's to be something like a Learjet. Anyway, we asked the FBI here. They were unaware and unable to answer questions, but said that they had gotten calls from every major media in the United States, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, everybody. And then I've contacted our colleagues at CBS in D.C., and they've asked the Pentagon. In fact, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld just took a question on this. Now, they are denying that there was any U.S. military action, U.S. Air Force action. So we will pass that along. We'll do that. There's other information as well that's coming around that we'll have to be looking at for them in the coming days and weeks. One is that there was a gentleman on the plane that contacted 911 in Greensburg.
He went to the state. His call was funneled to the state police barracks in Greensburg.
That's right. He called 911 and he was in the bathroom, and the sum total of that phone call that we can understand is that yes, we've been hijacked. And the man was in a high state of alarm, obviously, and there was no information, as we know, as to where this plane was headed. But we also learned that when the plane was 80 miles within Pittsburgh, the control tower at Pittsburgh tried to contact the plane. And at that point, the plane did not respond, but did veer up towards Erie and then began circling back in a southeasterly direction. And our information is now that the control tower at Pittsburgh was evacuated at that point. And that would have been, you know, in our minds, a very highly unusual action. I've contacted the FBI about that. They do not want to comment about that because they call it, quote unquote, close to the investigation. But there are concerns about what was going on with the air traffic in the air at that time. You know, whether those planes were protected, and what does that say about what the authorities knew or feared about the target of the plane that eventually crashed in Somerset County.
We can say that one congressman said he was briefed by the Marine Corps, and he was told that plane, the one that crashed in Somerset County, was targeting Camp David. Now, before you get to Camp David, you still have the White House and the Capitol building to go.
That's right.
So how they came up with the information that was Camp David, who knows for sure? We don't know what conversations were going on between the pilot and the air traffic controllers prior to any of this, except air traffic control here in Pittsburgh, according to Mayor Tom Murphy and to County Executive Jim Roddy, was the plane was not responding to calls from the Pittsburgh.
Did not respond, and then apparently they left the tower. And that's a highly unusual. Now, I understand that they returned to the tower at a short time after that, but the evacuation is something that authorities don't really want to comment at this point. Now, we are not in the business of reporting rumors, but in a situation like this, there are facts up in the air. We're just reporting what we know. But if you take a situation like this where, you know, you've already had the planes that have crashed at the Trade Center, and this is some time after that, you know, the United States military would have had to been in high alert, and it would certainly be possible
this
that
plane
there would
crashed
be
about an
F-16s.
hour after the second plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
And they knew it was not responding to Pittsburgh. They knew it was on an errant course, so it was certainly possible that jets from Wright Air Force Base or any of these places could have been in the air, and that is speculation, but it's a probability. So these are questions that will have to be answered, you know, in the coming days and weeks, and I think we'll stay on top of that.
Well, given the description from the woman about the size of the plane and the color of the plane, it would not seem to be a military plane at all,
but not unlike one.
But not unlike one.
I mean, she talked about a big fin and a big tail fin, and you know, eyewitness testimony being what it is. I mean, and we are not getting any comment on what planes would have been in the area. I mean, obviously, they would have tried to track that down at this point, and we're not getting comments on that. So I don't want to, you know, what we have right now is the Pentagon denies that there was any U.S. military action against this plane, and we accept that. But there are questions around this that I think that we'll continue to pursue.
Well, to add fuel to the speculation, again, as we talked about before, the eyewitness with whom I spoke said that she heard a boom. Then she saw the Flight 93 wobble, bank to the right, and go nose down into the ground. What was that boom?
Right. Right.
I don't know, and obviously we're not going to know until the investigators can go in and start piecing together some of the information. Again, this is all speculation. There is nothing to confirm it. The military, including Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, has denied that the United States indeed shot down a passenger airliner.
I can tell you that reporters all over the United States are asking these questions right now, and they are asking them of the highest people in the government, including the Defense Secretary. So, you know, we'll try to get answers, and very clear answers haven't been provided as to what was going on with this plane.
No, perhaps they're not going to give us any answers until they know a little bit more themselves. They may be just as much up in the air as to what exactly happened to this plane as we are at this moment.
That's right.
I'm sure you'll keep on top of it for us, Andy. I will. Thank you so much. We should also say the president's speech scheduled for 9 o'clock, I believe, has been moved up now to 8:30.
Yes, he will be speaking at 8:30. You know, Stacey, we were talking earlier, as many of us have, that we remembered, of course, when the World Trade Center was bombed several years ago, and there was a, you know, the amount of explosives did not bring that building, those buildings, to the ground. And we saw these planes crash today and then saw these buildings fall. People were questioning exactly what happened, what could have caused it. We have a World Trade Center engineer who has a comment.
They're very strong buildings, as you remember from the blast the last time. So,
but what does it take as an engineer to do the damage? Oh no! Let's get ready.
As this man is standing here saying they're very strong buildings and that he expected them to continue to stand, we in the background see the buildings collapse, which again feeds that feeling that there was something else, that there may have been something else that brought those buildings down.
There was a lot of talk there in New York of another explosion prior to the collapse of the first building. When we talk about the World Trade Center also, we should say that we're really talking about, as my notes here show, 7 buildings, including the 2 twin towers, those huge structures, 110 stories tall. There was also a 47-story office building, which you told the viewers earlier this evening, Patrice, has also come crashing to the ground. It caught fire through all of this and finally succumbed to the fire itself, and it came crashing down. There's also an 8-story U.S. Customs office and a 22-story hotel, all in that complex. But right now, those 3 buildings, the 2 big towers, have down to the ground, and now also the 47-story office building. That's almost the size of the USX Tower.
Absolutely. I mean, this is unbelievable. We also want to mention that there were over 1,200 companies leasing space in those buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that there were some huge numbers of people employed. We had heard as many as possibly 50,000 people, but 1,200 companies leasing space.
Andy said before, there's so many people there that each building had its own zip code.
Yes.
And so that just shows you the number of people who were there, the number of people who worked there. And it was just a horrible, horrible event for all of us to watch on television here, but you can imagine what the people there felt like.
And can only imagine. Let's take a listen to what some of the people saw.
Bob Orr, as we continue to show pictures of what happened in Lower Manhattan during and after the collapse of the World Trade Center, and occasionally show pictures of the Pentagon being hit by a hijacked plane, let's talk about what are supposed to be security things on the ground. No one wants to be flip about this situation, but anybody who travels knows that what was supposed to be security systems on the ground at most, if not at all airports, number one, are manned by people who are outsourced contractors and who are paid, if not minimum wage, something near minimum wage. I've heard airline travelers talk about this for years. Has anybody in Washington been aware of, it's hard to get an absolute first-class security system when it's low pay and nobody really seems to be paying attention. Quite frankly, at your average airport, there's been a sense, rightly or wrongly, that somebody who scored in the high 90s on a dumb test could get through what passes for security at most of our airports.
Unfortunately, you're right, Dan. It's been long known to be the weak point in the system. We have these metal detectors that are set up at the security screening points, and they're only as good as the people monitoring the equipment. In most cases, there's a split jurisdiction. Usually it's the airport authority that's in charge of security until you get into the gate area. And then once you talk about the gate area, it's up to the individual airlines to secure that tarmac spot and their airplanes. Now, this is something else that I don't know whether we've talked about it through the day, but something else that will be looked at. There is also, I suppose, a possibility this could be some kind of inside job. This could have been somebody working on the tarmac at Boston and also at Dulles and also at Newark. I don't know that, but a couple of points are worth making here. When tests have been done on these X-ray checkpoints, many, many times the testers are able to get weapons through those points, explosives, and guns. It usually leads to an uproar on Capitol Hill. It leads to all kinds of threats from Congress that a crackdown is about to happen, and it just simply hasn't happened. This is a system built largely on trust, built largely on the fact that we haven't had an episode certainly like this. We haven't even had a hijacking in this country for quite some time. The emphasis is on keeping guns off of airplanes. And the thought is if you keep a gun off an airplane, you'll stay away from the hijacking regime. But if you have, and I repeat, Dan, if you have a suicide terrorist willing to die in the attack, it could be. He could walk right through a manned checkpoint. He could fit the profile of all the normal passengers and through some kind of means on the plane take control of that airliner. A number of things, I think it's safe to say, went wrong today. And it was proven once again today that the system is not very good. And today it failed terribly.
That was Bob Orr along with Dan Rather. It was interesting, Patrice. He said something about the heightened security to make sure guns don't get on board. We know this much, that a woman by the name of Barbara Olson, who is married to the Solicitor General of the United States, Mr. Olson, was on board the flight that crashed near the Pentagon, right next to the Pentagon. She was able to make 2 cell phone telephone calls to her husband prior to the crash, and she said the plane had been hijacked, and she said they had some sort of weapons that looked like knives.
Yeah,
so while the
knife-like
concern is over guns, perhaps in all of these instances, 4 hijackings that we know of, they were all done with knife-type instruments, something we're just not sure of. Also, earlier, we're going to rerun this particular video, and one of the most amazing parts of this you're going to see in just a moment is that when the trade tower, one of the trade towers comes down, this billowing debris and dust just comes rolling toward the photographer, and the photographer is part of a medical team.
Yes, we're not sure whether he is a doctor or not, but at one point he is asking people if they need help, and later on help set up an area where people can get help. Let's take a look.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. So I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. They told me just to wait here. Semi-staging area. See if I can help, so that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I've just seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. No one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Yeah, that almost made it work. Looking north on the West Side Highway. You guys going in?
Yeah.
Come with you. You know, you might not want to get too much closer because the more buildings could come down, then we're not going to help anybody.
All right.
I think we should. Yeah.
Where's the incident come out?
Let's just.
Oxygen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait right here. Let's just station up right here. Okay.
All right, Doc.
Why don't we set up? Can you hang IVs from this pole here?
Okay.
Okay.
There, buddy.
Yeah. We just heard another explosion. They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there. Just gonna wait here until they bring some people out. I was hooked up with some firemen with some first aid stuff.
What are we doing?
You know what?
Anything?
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay?
Hold on to tie again to all units that are available. We're heading up a new command post on Murray Street and West Street. Any units available, report it when you're all up to this.
And that, of course, was Dr. Mark Heath. Now, we didn't know this earlier, but I had mentioned that he was someone who seemed to be involved in the medical community. And he, of course, was talking about people who were needing oxygen from the dust, that he had seen no trauma at that point, but did realize that it was not a good idea to go any closer to the collapsed buildings because there was no telling what other buildings in the area might fall. It was wonderful to have that, a true eyewitness account.
The scene you see of the dust and the debris billowing and showering down on him is just like you see in a Hollywood movie, except unfortunately, tragically, that one was for real. That was when one of the trade towers collapsed. Once again, the President of the United States is scheduled to address the country in approximately 1/2 hour from now. Joining us is John Delano, our political consultant. And John, we've already heard from some members of Congress. I talked to Senator Rick Santorum earlier. We've seen some of the other ones come and go on the television. What's your take? What's going on?
Well, there's no doubt, Stacey, that at a time like this, we're going to see our government act together in unity, in bipartisanship. And we just saw a half hour ago the leadership of the Congress, Republicans and Democrats together saying, we stand behind the President of the United States at this perilous time. And the truth is that when you think about the things that they bicker about in Washington all the time, Republicans and Democrats going at each other over all kinds of issues, they all seem so insignificant, so really meaningless when you see scenes that we've just seen on this television this afternoon, this evening. There's no doubt in my mind that we are witnessing a unified Congress that will be behind the President when he speaks in a half hour.
You mentioned earlier when you joined us in this broadcast that they will be unified. It was interesting in Donald Rumsfeld's news conference, the Senate, I'm not sure which senator it was.
Senator Carl Levin, the Democrat.
When asked about, there's been a lot of debate, as you well know at home, about how far up in the agenda the Defense Department budget is going to be. Republicans wanted up higher. President Bush wanted up higher. The Democrats said, no, let's worry about some other things first. He said, no doubt about it now, it's moving up.
Yeah, you know, that's the natural reaction. You're going to see both parties come together, I think, in a unified agenda here. Now, the President, we would expect in the next half hour, when he speaks to the country, he will certainly demonstrate his resolve. He'll demonstrate the unity of the country behind getting at these terrorists who caused such horrific damage in this country. And I think no one's going to quarrel with him when he says the words that he says. Now, the specific acts, we don't really expect the President to come out tonight and say, we're going to do X, Y, Z. But whatever he decides, he almost has, in many ways, a free hand. He has a free hand because under the War Powers Act, he is not only the commander-in-chief, which the Constitution gives him that power, but the War Powers Act that Congress enacted a couple decades ago essentially gives the President a free hand to respond to this kind of attack on the United States. You mentioned earlier, Stacey, that Senator Santorum calls this an act of war.
Yes, he did.
And certainly that is what many, many Americans believe, that how else can you describe what happened here? Of course, the declaration of an act of war is something that can only be done by the Congress, and is usually done at the request of the President of the United States, and it's done against a specific nation.
Yes.
And I'm not sure we're at that stage quite yet. But, you know, all of this is legalistic stuff because the President has the power. He has the power to act if he chooses to act.
It's interesting, though. Senator Santorum said it, Senator Warner said it, that they're not only talking about whoever masterminded these things, they are also talking about the countries who harbor these terrorists, that they had better, they're on guard, they're on alert now, because this country will go after them if they continue to harbor the terrorists.
Well, and they should be on guard, and the United States, I suspect, will take action once they determine which country it is. The bottom line in all of this is that I think we always see in a crisis like this tremendous unity of our government on both sides. And that's because, you know, forget about the partisan stuff, because there were Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all kinds of people were killed today.
Yes.
And Americans stand first, and I think above all else, for Americans. And we're going to see that, I think, not only in the President's address later tonight, but certainly when the Congress convenes tomorrow, which I think was very significant. They announced that about a half hour ago, that the Congress will be in session tomorrow simply to point out that no matter what terrorists do in this country, they're not going to stop the government of the United States from operating.
The other interesting thing, I think, is that when all this took place, President Bush was in Sarasota, Florida. He then flew to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. He was scheduled to go back to Washington. They diverted him there to make sure for his safety. Then he went to Nebraska to an Air Force base there. Then he flew back to Washington. Symbolically, it's very important for him to deliver that address tonight from the Oval Office, isn't it?
I think it is, and I think, but it was also more important that the White House be safe and secure. And so there was no question that they did the right thing by taking the time, diverting the president. That's part of the traditional security measures, that when there's a crisis that could cause damage to the health and safety of the president, you get him up in the air and you move him out of the capital city. But you're right, you want him back in the capital city when he addresses the nation from the White House, simply to demonstrate the power and really the unity and the strength of this country. And I think he's doing exactly what you would expect him to do.
And I think you're going to hear a lot of comments after the president's speech tonight from other members of Congress who are waiting to say something, and they're all going to say, I believe you're right, they are 1,000% in back of the president of the United States.
There's no one off this train right now. Everyone's in it together.
All right, thank you, John.
You know, Stacey, earlier people were talking also about the bombings of the missiles of whatever in Kabul, and we do want to reiterate that that is not, our information is the United States is not firing on Afghanistan, and we have mentioned that many people are believing this is an act of war, but we are not responding in that way at this time. There is, however, a very strong feeling, not only in our Congress of unity, but among all people. We cannot name the enemy at this time, but we know the enemy is out there, and we want to be as strong and united as we possibly can. Don Cannon went out into the streets of Pittsburgh and got a sense of a feeling about Pittsburghers and their patriotism.
Again, FBI, emergency personnel here. We did ask, we had a briefing just a few minutes ago. We asked state police about the numbers, about people on the plane.
This is the sound of a country under siege.
Anybody else? Special edition, hot off the presses, 25 cents.
A city angry and afraid.
I got wind of the bombing in New York and tried to proceed on to my classes. I'm informed that all my classes were shut down and now all the buses are shut down and I'm just trying to get home.
It's unreal. I mean, there's people with friends and family all over the place. It's hitting a lot closer to home than just Somerset.
Are people wondering why?
It's frightening. It's unbelievable. It seems like a nightmare.
I think the key is just to try and proceed as normally as we can and not let the terrorism affect our daily lives. I think the more that happens, the more effective they think they're becoming.
Right now, I think it's awful scary that these terrorists came so close to us. And it's just, it's unbelievable. And I'm just glad I'm on my way home.
Are people wondering what's next?
I just think it's pretty scary today to, especially we work in, a tall building downtown, and to hear a plane crash so close, it's fearful.
For some people, the answer is prayer. For others, it's payback.
Absolutely tragic. We have to pay him back. I really, really hope the president comes up on television tonight and inspires the nation to unify.
Talk to the people who live and work here in Pittsburgh, and they can remember the most frightening days in American history. The Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. But no day is blacker than this, September 11th, 2001.
Well, it's absolutely amazing. It's unbelievable. It's beyond reason. You can't understand what's happening, what's happened, how this can happen.
I think it's the worst disaster in our country, Dawn, that's ever happened. It's really terrible.
This is Pearl Harbor and more.
Yeah, I think it's worst thing that's ever happened to our country. I don't know what's going to happen, but there's going to be some bad times, I think, ahead.
Are you afraid at all?
I'm not afraid, but I'm worried that we are perhaps under siege by terrorist organizations that have no central coordinating entity, and as such, we're subject to attack at any place in America at any time.
Shock, anger, bewilderment, only some of the emotions being felt by Pittsburghers today. And I think those emotions will be felt even more deeply as we begin to understand the full nature of what happened, the number of people who died and who were injured. We'll know more about that as this day and others go on later this week, and we shall take it from there. Patrice, Stacey.
It's going to take some time for us, Don, unfortunately, to determine how many people did perish today and how many were injured in New York alone. The death toll has to be astounding.
It's fruitless even to guess, Stacy. It will be certainly in the thousands. It will be. It may take weeks before we know how many actually lost their lives today, because initial reports had more than 1,000 injured, and those were early reports. And many days will go by before we know the full toll, if we ever do.
If indeed, if we ever do. Thank you, Don. Don Cannon in our newsroom. Patrice, you were noting earlier that word has come out that when that first tower was hit by the plane, of course, emergency crews rushed to the scene.
Exactly.
They were all there. The second plane hit, they were all there. And then when the tower started to come down, New York, you said estimated they had at least 400?
At least 400 who first responded. Yeah, emergency personnel who first responded, and then it was determined that, conservatively estimating it, at least half of those people perished.
Well, that's just the emergency personnel.
Exactly.
And we saw just a moment ago with that billowing cloud of debris and dust that if you were directly under it, it would have been extremely difficult to obviously survive that. At a time like this, of course, a lot of people turn to prayer.
They surely do. And we've talked about the number of prayer vigils and prayer services that are going on all around the area tonight. Lynn Hayes Freeland is at one prayer service at East Liberty Presbyterian Church. Let's go to Lynn now by phone. Lynn?
That's right, Patrice. I am in East Liberty at the East Liberty Presbyterian Church, where a prayer service has just ended. Now, the doors of the church here in East Liberty have been open for prayer and meditation throughout the afternoon for church members, as well as members of the community who are looking for some solace could come in and pray. But the church decided late today to actually put together this service to give church members, people in the community, anyone looking for some spiritual guidance, an opportunity to come together. Now, many of those who came out for this evening service have friends, family members, not only in New York, but also in the Pentagon, in Washington, D.C. as well. Many members of the church here stood up, asked for prayers, talked about personal relationships, and looked for guidance, looked for answers to the question, why? The service here ended just a few minutes ago with a call for peace, and those that I spoke with who were in attendance here tell me that they were glad they were able to come together with like-minded people to share in just their quest for answers. Patrice?
And when something like this does strike, people, as you say, of all ages and ethnicities come together and want to participate in something like this. Were you hearing just mostly positive prayer and let's come together messages, or were you hearing rumblings of other things tonight?
No, Patrice, for the most part, it was prayer for very specific families. As I mentioned, there were individuals here who had family members that at this point they presume have been killed, but they didn't know exactly. Now, the chapel here holds about 200 people, I am told by the church, and it was nearly filled. And as you mentioned, they ran the gamut from probably 12 to 13-year-old teens. Then there were probably people as old as probably 80 years old in attendance here tonight. But again, they all seem to want peace, and they were simply looking for some spiritual guidance here tonight.
Okay, Lynn Hayes Freeland speaking with us from East Liberty Presbyterian Church after a prayer meeting has ended tonight.
The school a couple of miles away, windows were shaken.